The developer documents for COD Zombies have been available to people for about a month now. First, it was the Black Ops 2 ones that leaked, giving us info on every map in that game, the most interesting being Transit, where we learned the true reason why the Nakda and Toten building exists in that map. I've already done a video on that, so if you haven't seen it, I will leave the link to it down in the description. Shortly after, Black Ops 3's developer documents leaked. However, before I could download them and look at them for myself, they were taken down on the orders of Activision, so I never got to see them. Every night I stayed up crying, thinking about all of the juicy stuff I missed out on. That was until Nanakos, the original uploader of these documents, brought them back. So this time, I was fast, and after scouring through all of these Treyarch documents for a good hour or so, there are details about each and every map, Revelations, Gorod, Zetsubou, the Eisendrache, and Shadows of Evil that are more than worthy of a video. So let's begin with the truth about Revelations. What were Treyarch's original plans for this map? And disclaimer, I'm going to be more focusing on the story side of things, because to me not only is that the most interesting, but it also tells you lore that Treyarch either changed last minute or is still relevant to the game but isn't told to us through in-game content such as radios, documents and ciphers. This is info that we would never know otherwise. Yes, of course they also changed gameplay mechanics and features. That's going to happen during the development cycle of any video game or media. But anyway, take a look at Treyarch's original plans for Revelations, because the brief description of its narrative was Richtof and Nikolai, Takeo and Dempsey, thinking they have completed their mission to get rid of the multiverse of zombies, return to the Genesis universe to meet up with Maxis and Samantha. But soon after their return, Maxis unknowingly releases the Shadow Man from the summoning key, and thus allows the Apothicons to enter and infect the Genesis universe. Genesis, for those of you who don't know, means the origin or mode of formation of something. For the map's narrative, they wrote, in our fiction, the Apothicons and the Shadow Man are the ones who control Element 115 and have been seeding all the multiverses for eons. They seek to control life forms within all dimensions, turning them into their servants. As a result of their actions and origins, our heroes created a gateway to a universe that has been impenetrable by the Apothicons, a universe where Element 115 cannot enter. They call it the Genesis universe. Our heroes, being Primus of course, don't know who created it or why it's immune, but they have been working towards destroying versions of themselves in other universes and timelines with 115, so younger immortal versions of themselves can live in the Genesis universe. By doing this, the timelines in the other universes have collapsed and have been destroyed forever. The Genesis universe is the only universe that remains. So that describes the original story of Revelations. Monty's perfect world created by him, this Genesis universe was immune to 115. However, as we saw in the intro cutscene, when the Shadow Man was released by Dr. Maxis from the summoning key, he fractured open the Genesis universe, allowing the Apothicons to enter. The synopsis of Revelations Treyarch give in these documents tells us how Revelations began, explained in the intro cutscene, where Primus arrive in the basement of the farmhouse, which is Dr. Monty's house. Richtofen destroys the teleporter. Primus then meet their younger selves. Everyone then goes outside to see the world is free of zombies. The crew witness a beautiful golden sunset over the English countryside, because if you didn't know, Dr. Monty's house is set in Sheffield in England. But later that night, Maxis is awoken and tempted by the Shadow Man. He hears whispering voices calling to him from within the summoning key. Maxis tinkers with the key, where he unknowingly releases the Shadow Man, and then as the other characters wake, the Shadow Man becomes a beacon for the Apothicons, where the world begins to fracture and rip open as the Apothicons' giant blue 115 sun crosses over from another universe. It emerges from the center of the Earth. The Earth is now completely broken apart, where time and space begins to merge, causing structures from previous zombies maps to begin to materialize on the fractured terrain, and the countryside where Monty's house once sat now becomes a floating island in space as the Element 115 sun grows. Hundreds of giant Apothicon gods then swim around the blue sun, using their tentacles to harvest 115, throwing it into portals to fertilize the universe with zombie creating matter, i.e. meteors of Element 115. And they finish the intro by saying Monty is then taken by the Shadow Man. Primus tell the children to head into the basement and lock the door. There is one final battle that they must fight. So Treyarch's original plan for the intro of Revelations isn't too different from what we actually got. However, there are a couple of interesting facts worth pointing out here. One, we figured this out anyway because we can see it happening, but it was never officially told to us in game. It's called the Apothicon Sun, but this is a giant ball of 115, and we can see the Apothicons taking 115 from its source and then spitting it out into different universes across the multiverse, which explains how the zombie outbreak began. In the early days of the timeline, when we had the meteors of 115 in Tunguska in Japan, these 115 meteors was what caused Group 935 to start. They began experimenting with this and eventually created zombies. But the 115 meteors originally came from these apothecon gods, otherwise known as the Elder Gods, harvesting element 115 from this blue sun and spitting it out into different dimensions, hoping that one day humanity would use it so that they could then turn them into their servants via the undead. It's also interesting how they state, and again, we knew this, but it's cool to see it here, how it was a result of our actions in Origins, opening the gateway in the crazy place to this Genesis universe where Monty's house is, which was supposed to be impenetrable, hence why it was called Monty's Perfect Universe, because the Apothecons weren't able to send 115 to it like they were the rest of the multiverse. Within these developer documents, you have to remember that they would have been written before Black Ops 3 even released. The entirety of that game's life cycle, as is the case with every COD Zombies, even Black Ops 6, is planned out before it's even released. So with Black Ops 6, for example, Treyarch know exactly what is going to happen in the end in DLC 4, or it seems like we might be getting DLC 5 now. That doesn't mean the map's finished or even started to have been made, but everything in regards to it, what they're going to do, is pre-planned. They will still change things as they go on, but at the very least, they've got a good idea of what they're going to do. Of course, they have to. If they don't know how the game's going to end, then how are they going to work out what to do in DLC 1, 2 and 3? And well, two very important characters, the Shadowman and Dr. Monty, the ideas that Treyarch had for those two at the time were underdeveloped, but it's cool to see how they took shape. So in regards to the Shadowman in Revelations, they said he will have a reprising role on this map. While the extent is still being worked out, he will be a part of the final main quest. We should also look to include him for special rounds to increase difficulty, using his curse attacks developed in Shadows. And then as for Dr. Monty, he's different because remember, we saw the Shadowman very early on in Black Ops 3 and Shadows of Evil, but Dr. Monty wasn't introduced to us until DLC 3, Gorod Krovi. So for him and his role in Rev, they said, while at the time of this writing, Dr. Monty is just a concept, we are thinking he is a godlike force who is the caretaker of the Genesis universe and is the person responsible for the perks, magic box, gobblegum, and Wallbice, who wants to help stop the Apothecons in their mission of destruction. Over the course of the DLC season, we will be building and revealing more and more of this information of the Dr. Monty character. It is in DLC 4 that we will reveal him in the flesh. Currently, the thinking is we will see him sporadically throughout the level, similar to the Shadowman's appearance in Shadows of Evil. Now, of course, that last bit didn't happen. We didn't see him physically in Revelations, we just heard him speak, whereas we had seen the Shadowman physically twice, which is kind of a shame that we never actually saw Dr. Monty in game, just through cutscenes, but they described him as being a godlike force who was the caretaker of the Genesis universe, and while we know Dr. Monty turned out to be a lot more than that, from what the Chronorium tells us, but that never officially lets us know he is a god, he just comes across as that. But even here, we have Treyarch describing Monty as a godlike figure, and when you look at what he tells us, how he gave humanity free will, he listens to people's prayers, not forgetting he has his own perfect world and is able to give us things such as the perks, the mystery box, wall weapons, etc. He is not God, as we would think of in our reality, but he has all of the attributes of one, if you get what I mean. And of course, also from these leaked documents, we now know that Dr. Monty is based off John Dee, a mathematician and astronomer and occultist and alchemist that was alive during medieval times. And I say may because it's not officially confirmed, although very much suggested, became Dr. Monty. Let's take a look at Gorod Krovi then. It's interesting how in these documents they say they originally intended in the intro of this map, when we see our characters falling out of the portal in the sky and they grab onto Peter McCain's parachute, well, Peter was replaced by a zombie or vice versa. Their original plans was for the crew to grab onto a zombie with no arms wearing a parachute. They don't mention it being Peter McCain. It took place in 1943 when World War II was still going on, in the immediate aftermath of a large battle between Germans and Russian forces in Stalingrad. After the Russians retook the city a few days prior to the start of the level, Group 935 launched a counter-attack using their wonder weapons and their Dragon Corps, forcing the Russians, reinforced by the 62nd Rifle Division and Mech Battalion, to defend the city and repel the initial German attacks. Victory seemed to be at hand for the Russians, but in reality, this was all a part of Group 935's plan to draw all of the Russian forces into the city and inflict the crushing blow. Special bombs containing 115 were released into the city, turning all of its inhabitants into zombies. All except one, Nikolai Belensky. So this is a piece of lore that we aren't told anywhere else. That could be because it was an early idea of Treyarch's that they never actually implemented, so it's not officially a part of the lore. This was just what they were thinking. But at the same time, that would give us an explanation as to why we see Nikolai in his mech suit in Gorod, as to why he's the only one alive. And even then, this is cool lore to me, because yes, we have Group 935, the Germans and the Russians battling each other, Germany having the dragons, the Russians having the giant robots, but when you take into consideration Group 935 were doing that to draw the Russians into the city so that they could drop a bomb containing 115, turning all of its inhabitants and soldiers into zombies, leaving just Nikolai alive because he was in the mech suit, is a great bit of story in my opinion that we don't hear about, and does explain some questions that we have. We know that Treyarch originally planned for us to be able to use the Russian mech suit in Gorod to kill zombies and open up new routes. It was going to be a part of the main Easter egg. We would need to fully upgrade it to defeat Nikolai, but for one reason or another, that never ended up happening. As far as the dragons go in the story, we have an official explanation, but they also give us one here saying in this timeline, dragons existed in the past. Using Element 115, the 935 scientists teleported those creatures from their past and outfitted them with special collars, allowing them to control these savage creatures, making them the ultimate weapon of war. What actually happens in the story is they are regrown by Division 9 in laboratories, hatched out and then grow to become Group 935's weapons. But Treyarch's original plans for the storyline of the dragons is they existed in the past in this universe, and Group 935 teleported them from their past to present day. One thing that is mentioned in these developer documents that I have made a video on before are the Reznov challenges. We know Reznov is a part of the COD Zombie story. We see a signpost from him in the map which says "Vengeance is mine" VR, so he was here in Gorod Krovi, but Treyarch also planned to have something in the map called the Reznov challenges, where they said we would like to create various challenges and rewards similar to what we did in Origins with the Ritual of the Ancients. We would like to have rewards for individual players as well as co-op rewards. We would like the challenge board to be themed around the idea of a lone wolf soldier plotting his revenge on the Germans. We should allude to this being authorized by Viktor Reznov. Treyarch do that, but the challenges we have in Gorod are not officially called the Reznov challenges. They didn't go with that in the final version. For Zetsubou No Shima's narrative in these documents, Treyarch wrote, "The year is 1943 and World War II is still going on. The Division 9 facility is a secret biological research lab constructed by Group 935 on a remote South Pacific island. Both Japanese and German scientists were working together, experimenting with 115 and its mutating effects on human, animal, and plant biology. Their experiments were focused on 115 to mutate DNA and specific genes to create better soldiers as well as lethal biological weapons. The results have been both good and bad. Mostly bad, since everyone on the island has been infected and turned into zombies. The island is based on the Micronesian island of Pompeii, where the framed ruins of Nan Modal reside. Similar to Shinonuma, they wanted to have 115 meteors in the vista of the map, which there is, and then they said the 115 meteors on the island caused strong fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field in the area. These pulses wreak havoc on mechanical instrumentation, thus many of the planes that have entered the airspace have crashed on the island. That's really all the interesting things there was for Zetsubou No Shima, to be honest. Everything we're pretty much aware of. For the Eisendrache, the original narrative was, thematically, Griffin Castle is a twisted sister of the Giant. The castle sits upon the top of the mountain and is the control centre for the German spaceport situated in the valley below. In the valley around the castle are the rocket launch facilities that ferry equipment to Griffin Station on the moon, which the Nazis are in the process of building. The castle's main purpose is to be the mission control facility for the rocket launchers. All the planning and monitoring of the moon missions happens at the castle, the main banquet hall serving as the mission control centre. The castle also serves as a research facility for Group 935, so some of the other rooms can reflect this and reuse assets from the Giant. Many of the scientists of Group 935 live here or have stayed here at one time during the war. Richtofen, Maxis, Samantha, and Fluffy stayed here. When the Germans lost World War I, they brought many of the ancient artifacts from the dig site featured in Origins to the castle for further research and experimentation. These artifacts are stored in the subterranean areas of the castle. Although they mention the dragon heads in these documents, it is quite a shame how they don't elaborate why they decided to add them in the game, besides from them being similar to the dog heads in Mob of the Dead. Is there a lore reason behind it? They don't say, because there's nothing we get from the game or the Canorium. And finally, the documents for Shadows of Evil, which they actually call Dead City, are some of the coolest in my opinion in terms of how it could have translated in game. The story begins as darkness and chaos envelop in the city. The characters are seemingly brought together by accident to fight for survival through interdimensional creatures and undead rampaging in the twisted streets of the Dead City. Each of the characters wakes up in a seedy hotel room alone, suffering from an acute case of amnesia. In each room there are 4 grisly murder scenes unique to each character. These scenes haunt our characters as they fight for survival to try and remember pieces of their lives, how they got here, and if they are responsible for the grisly murders. They're also plagued by a shared dream of a shadowy figure. While the identity of this character is unknown to them, they suspect this person is connected to their current predicament, but slowly they will discover that their meeting is no accident, and that each of them played their part in unleashing this otherworldly evil onto the city. In their initial concepts for the Shadow Man, they described him as being a character similar to that of the G-Man in Half-Life. He appears to them in areas of the map, watching the players. He also communicates to them in their minds, offering cryptic guidance, but he is using them to complete the rituals to unlock the dimensional barriers between worlds and allow the Ancient Ones to reclaim the Earth. And the final thing that I wanted to point out that Treyarch talk about on the City of the Dead documents were regarding the beast, the creature that you turn into, where they wrote our 4 characters are possessed by an ancient interdimensional tentacle creature. It was infused into them by the Shadow Man using ancient rituals. A cryptic occult symbol marks the neck of each of the characters, signifying they are possessed. Now we know in the game it turns out is the hand that we see the symbol on, but I'm guessing it's because Shadows of Evil was the first map that we had and one of the first maps they started to develop. A lot of what we see in the documents for this is relatively close to what we ended up getting for the final version of the game. But yeah, there we go. That is for me all of the interesting stuff I found in the developer documents for Black Ops 3 Zombies that I thought was worth pointing out. So there we go. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. As always, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, drop a like rating, make sure you are subscribed to stay up to date with the latest content on the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, goodbye.